On today's podcast, we have a special guest from the UK. Welcome to Tabletop Shop. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Tabletop Shop podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Cody Pennington, and sadly, your other co-host, Nate Clark, is not here. He is off and away to Germany because he's getting married, but fear not, we have a special guest on the podcast today to render Nate obsolete. Our guest is a game designer hailing from the UK who has published a few different projects and currently has a Kickstarter that is live as we speak. So please welcome Andrew Prowse. Andrew. Hi.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So as I understand it, it's about 4 o'clock in the UK right now, 4 in the evening.
Yes. 4 p.m. It's starting to get dark already.
Okay. That's bizarre. Yeah, it's 8 o'clock here, but it's definitely getting dark when it gets to 4 p.m. for us too. Do you guys do you do daylight savings?
We do, yeah. So for us, basically, we try to get a bit more savings time, but for us, it's getting dark at about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock now. So it's some people get very depressed about it.
I can imagine so. That's like most of your day gone already.
Yeah. I mean, the weird thing is you wake up and it's dark and you get home from work and it's already dark.
No one likes that. I don't know. Apparently we're doing away with that here in the US pretty soon, but I guess we'll find out. Well, let's just hit us off with this. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Did you grow up in England then?
Yes, well, basically, I've lived in England nearly all my life. I've been gaming since a very, very young age. We used to play like your normal board games at home around the tables of family, like Monopoly, Cluedo, that kind of thing.
The classics.
When I was 8 years old, I got Hero Quest for Christmas, which kind of brought me to the proper new gaming industry. So it really kicked things off that games can be more than just roll and move. And from then, I basically went to college and met up with some good friends, started doing Dungeons and Dragons as a little group together.
Classic.
And then when I finished my degree, I came back to Leeds again and just started designing games. Absolutely loved it. So I made absolutely loads of games over the next few years, but they were all kind of just played at home with family. And my friends kept saying, oh, you've got to like pick some really good ones and get them published. So over the next 10 years, I worked towards picking out the best ones I liked and tried to get them made.
Interesting. When I hear a lot of designers' stories, it usually sounds like they kind of, I don't know, accidentally fall into the design industry, but it sounds like you're a lot more intentional about this.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's something that I loved doing. I always loved gaming with friends. And it was the idea that I always like having a creative project on the go. I always like making something or designing something. And I loved sharing that experience with others. So when I started making different types of games, it seemed really natural that I'd want to do this either semi-professionally or professionally if I could do. So that was where it started moving towards Kickstarter.
How difficult was it for you to make that a profession, like something that was viable just to work on its own?
Oh, well, it's kind of basically still a hobby at the moment, but I'm a primary school teacher by day, which is very, very demanding, but it's a brilliant job to have. And then basically evenings, weekends, holidays, that kind of time, I really get to basically spend some time gaming, designing games, playing with friends. And there's a games club I go to regularly each week when I can do. I've also done some gaming online by Discord with some friends down in London. So we've done role-playing games that way where because I'm the kind of the designer, I'm normally the games master. So I make the event and we play it via Discord. So,
hey, well, that's efficient. If it works for you, keep doing it. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you were saying Hero Quest and Dungeons and Dragons were some of the games that got you into maybe the more hobby version of the board game hobby. Do you have any other favorite games that maybe were notable along your board game journey?
Oh, definitely. I mean, in terms of different landmark games, I'd have to pick out Lords of Waterdeep. That's a huge favorite of ours.
Yeah, I play that.
The whole worker placement, resource management, plus tying into the lore of the game as well, where it's not just the game, but there's more beyond it. We just adore that game, and that was a big new departure. The other one was Five Tribes. I'm not sure if you've played that one. It's kind of but again, worker placement in the desert program around. But it was one of those games where you have to spend the very first time you play it, you spend 25 minutes sitting and listening to the rules, but then you know it forever.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I have not played Five Tribes, but it's been on my list for quite a while.
Oh, I'd really recommend. I mean, there's a couple of expansion packs. The first expansion pack I definitely recommend getting, the Artisans one. The second one's a bit optional, but we always play it with your first expansion pack. What are the good ones? Oh, Betrayal at House on the Hill. Do you know that one?
I've played that just once. I need to play it more.
Oh, I love it because it was kind of a great mixture between competitive and collaborative, plus the story element as well. So that was another brilliant game for us.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's loads of good ones. I mean, in terms of like Seven Wonders, nearly everybody knows.
Oh, sure.
And then things like, what else? Above and Below is a good one because it's kind of a mixture of the resource management, but also the RPG system.
Yeah.
What are the really good ones? I mean, there's various classic ones like Dominion, which everyone's played. And as part of my job, basically, I like creating board game clubs in school. So there's a lot of games that I've basically played in school, like Dixit or King of Tokyo or Carcassonne, things like that you can play with children in about half an hour, 45 minutes. Wow. But I love getting them excited about it. And of course, whenever I'm designing on my own games, I always take it and play test it with them. So
sure. Hey, wow. I was actually going to ask about that. So you already have a little audience to play test with.
Yeah. This is the thing is they absolutely love the games. It's so heartening, especially when, I mean, as you know, the industry can be a very, very hard one to get into and hard one to get ahead. Sure. So I've been at times where I've been banging my head against a brick wall and then going back and the kid's like, can we play one of your games again? I'm like, yes, we can. That's cool.
Wow. So do you get good constructive criticism from primary schoolers?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the weird thing is that you'd think they'd be a bit more tame, but they're really bloodthirsty at times.
Wow.
My first game was one called Top Hats and Treachery, which is basically you're running a fancy deluxe hotel in old Victorian London, and you can kind of get guests in and basically build up the reputation, spread rumors about them. You can even bump them off and basically replace them with new people. And I actually originally designed this game to be played in class, teaching my children about Victorians. And they were always kind of like trying to wipe out each other's characters all the time. But no, they've really loved it. And they've given some suggestions as well.
Sounds like they can just be brutal, but I mean, sometimes that's just what you need for the board game industry, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, the thing, it's the silly thing is when you jumping through all that the loopholes of regulations. My first game, I had to put on something like a 14 plus rating just because it had a dice in it. This was when I was very, otherwise I'd have had to pay like £1,000 in safety testing or something crazy like
really?
that. Oh, it was ridiculous.
That's crazy.
I've learned more since then. I've made more good choices since, but the first experience is kind of like warn you off really a little bit.
Yeah. I didn't realize there was such strong regulation just in components and materials for games.
Oh yeah. The whole thing when you're designing games, you've got to get various bits of safety testing done. And depending upon what age you put in the game, like if it's 14 plus, it needs one level of safety testing, or if it's 12 plus, 10 plus, 8 plus, it gets more and more and more restrictive with the amount of safety testing you've actually got to do to make it playable.
Wow.
But there we go.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm an aspiring board game designer myself. I haven't gotten to publishing anything yet. Just have a lot of basically projects that are on various stages of the back burner. But
yeah,
it's the more I get into it, the more I hear things like this, like, oh man, I have to go through that hoop and that hoop just to get something out into the world. That's crazy.
Oh yeah. And I mean, obviously the best advice I'd give is keep creating. Whatever you do, keep creating. I mean, like in my first year when I came out of college, I think I designed 20 games in my first year, of which I actually physically made about 5. But just to have those ideas and think, why don't I make this type of game? Why don't I make that type of game? And the silly thing is that I've made so many games that after I looked back at them when I playtested them, I thought, they were all right, but nothing special. But then I've used little bits of those games in future games. Like, oh, right, that card system I really like. Let's use that again. Or like those resources. That was a good idea. I'll use that again when I make another game. So it's it's always recycling and improving is the idea.
Interesting. Do you find that as you play other people's new games, that will inspire you with new mechanisms to start incorporating into some of your games?
Oh, definitely. I mean, in terms of when I was making Top Hats, I spent about 7 years making that and finessing it and fine-tuning it. But then after I'd published that and it went to Kickstarter and succeeded, I then almost like went away and just played games and learned the mechanics. And then when I was making my second game, which was Merchants of Infinity, the space-based game, a little bit like sort of Deep Space Nine with resource management and trading, that kind of thing. Yeah. I made it like almost like as a present for my wife because she loves the whole like resource management, strategy, logistical kind of thing. So I wanted to show that I could make a gamery type game, putting all those mechanics in.
Yeah. And did you prove your worth? Did she accept it?
Oh yeah, she really likes it. It's great. And it looks gorgeous.
I looked that up while I was researching some of your games. I really like the graphic design of the artwork in it. It's a very compelling theme.
Oh, thank you. I mean, in terms of the actual artwork, I was really inspired by that because I've actually worked with people around the world now. I think with Merchants, my main graphic designer was in South America. The person who did the board was in Indonesia. The person who did the character artwork was in Malaysia. It was this international game experience.
Everybody on different time zone too. That must have been fun trying to make that work. Okay. Well, how about we jump into talking about your current Kickstarter? It's pronounced Skal, right? Not Skal?
No, yeah. It's more kind of like Skal.
Skal. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So
it's weird because I have a coworker named Skal. So every time I read that, I say it the wrong way. But
I mean, I suppose technically there's a correct way to pronounce it, but I thought any way that you pronounce it that makes you have fun is fine.
Okay.
Yeah, the idea was basically, after the games that I've made kind of like, the Top Hats was a fairly simple game. The Merchants was basically a bit more involved, medium weight game. So I wanted to see, could I make a lightweight game that would just appeal to everybody, where the mechanics, you could teach it in a minute and play it in 10 minutes. So the idea is, the Skal means cheers in Norwegian. So it's kind of based around a kind of like dice stacking, drinking game. Obviously, you don't have to play it as a drinking game, but you can if you want to. Where basically you draw a dice, you draw a card each turn, which shows you like a little piled up pattern of dice, and then all the players have got like a few dice in front of them with a kind of a group of shared dice in the middle. So you've each got a player mat that you basically start by stacking your own dice on, and then all the players kind of lunge for the dice in the middle to grab them one at a time and stack them up.
Yeah. So
whoever makes that pattern first grabs their cup. They've each got a little metal shot glass that comes with the game, and you raise it up and you call out Skal. So whoever does that first wins the card, and whoever wins enough cards wins the game. It's that simple.
Okay. And this was it was point based, right? So whoever got to a certain amount of points first.
Yeah, exactly. So the basic cards are literally just a pattern of dice. Make that pattern. The dice can be whichever way you like. Just make it. And they're just worth 1 point each. But then I thought, well, that's the simple version. Let's try and add a bit more depth to it. So some cards need a certain face of the dice to be facing outwards. Yeah. So they're worth 2 points. Some ones mean that like they're a bit harder to balance. There's a few overhanging dice that they're worth 2 points. There's some where you've actually got to close your eyes and stack the dice blind, which is also worth 2 points. So the game can be as simple or as complex as you like. There's even extra challenges you can throw in, like everyone's going to put one hand behind their back or everyone's going to close one eye. So for a dexterity game, that makes it quite challenging.
Yeah, well, great for a party game too. I'm sure you could throw all sorts of weird rules in there.
Oh, it's a brilliant party game. And the nice thing is you can play it as an adults-only drinking game. You can play it as a family fun game. You can play it as a quick, fast party game, however you like.
Excellent. Well, what was the inspiration for Skal with the whole the Norwegian Viking background?
Well, I've loved it. I mean, as a primary school teacher, my favorite topic to teach always has been Vikings. And I just taught Vikings for like 4 years in a row with the classes that I was at. And I actually went to speak to my head teacher, who's like planning out the topics for next year, and said, look, I love Vikings. I really do. But if I have to teach them every single year, it's going to be challenging. So can I maybe switch to a different topic? So she said she agreed. And then she put me on to like Tudors, like Henry VIII, Queen Elizabeth I, that kind of thing, which was great. But then after 4 months later, I thought, I miss Vikings.
Really?
Yeah. And then it was basically the middle of lockdown. And I'd taken Merchants of Infinity to Kickstarter at lockdown, which, as you can imagine, didn't work. Plus, it went up against a request. So there you go. So after a while, I was stuck on like I want to create a game, but I wasn't sure what to create it about. And then it kind of came around to this idea of, I want to make a simple game that everyone would like. I'd love to make it to do with Vikings. And I want to make it a very like tactile exploring game. And then those ideas just came together and became Skal.
Wow. Well, it seems like it culminated in a fine product. I've looked through the Kickstarter page. And again, just like Merchants of Infinity, I really like the graphic design, the artwork. I saw one name, was it Sebastian Kozanier?
Oh, yes. He's the graphic designer. I've worked with him on all my other games so far. He's brilliant.
So how did you get connected with him in the first place?
Oh, right. Well, initially it was via Board Game Geek and speaking to people there and on like forums and so on and saying, look, I'm really looking for a graphic designer. It's my first time making a professional game. Can anyone recommend me any? And then someone there called Cesar basically recommended me Sebastian's name and did a few initial talking with him. And the first time that I tried to do Top Hats, I went with like a local person that I knew and the artwork wasn't right. So I knew I had to go back and get it done really, really properly. So I spoke to Sebastian, and he really helped me pull together a really brilliant looking product. So I knew that when I was going to do Merchants of Infinity, I really wanted him on board. So I contacted him and we worked together for about a year and a half on that, which was just, as you've seen, the game was gorgeous. So when it came to Skal, I was like, right, so I want to get Sebastian. So I initially asked Sebastian and he's like, I'm really busy at the moment. I can't help you on this, but I can point you in some other good directions. So I then spent about 3 or 4 months speaking to other people, trying to get different things together, speaking to different people, getting different quotes. And I was like, right, well, I can more or less go for this now. I wish I had Sebastian. And then I had a message from Sebastian saying like, I'm actually available now if you want. And I was like, yes, please.
Well, I didn't realize that's such a long process just to get to work with a graphic designer.
Oh, yes. I mean, it's things like, depending upon how hands-on you want to be, it can slow the process down. Like, like let's imagine that you had a game for, I don't know, dancing hippos. And you're like, I've got a great game for dancing hippos. I want you to basically put hippos in dancing patterns and score points. Can you make this happen? And they'll go, yes, right, I'll do it. And you give them complete control. It'll probably be a lot easier for you, but you won't have as much say. However, if you've got some really definite ideas about exactly what you want, it becomes like a very, very negotiation process where you've got to do the best you can do, but also keep everybody as happy as possible. So
yes, which is not an easy task. A lot of people have a lot of different opinions. Oh,
it's so hard at times, especially like I say, when you're on different time zones, when they've got the projects on, it's hard, but it's worth kind of doing it well. I mean, like with Skal, the person I worked with on the art was called Jeanette Ramos, and she is a gorgeous artist. And I've got like obviously the box art done, and then all the gods and goddesses art, which looks phenomenal. But from there, it started off as like my ugly rough pencil drawings I sent to her. Was like, this is the kind of thing I want. Can you work me with this? And then she in her brilliant skill just came up with about like a whole set of like pencilish drawings. Like, do you mean something like this? And I'm like, yes, that looks gorgeous. And then it became kind of like a 2 or 3 month process back and forth where it's like, okay, we're going to work on Loki now. So how do you want him to be standing? All right. What sort of expression do you want? Like, okay, I like that expression. Could we just change the eyebrows a bit? Or could you just change the lighting behind him? And it's that fine tuning that really makes it work. But she was brilliant to talk to about that.
Sounds like she must have been easy to work with if you can just keep going back and forth, doing all these different iterations, like the same character.
Yeah, and she has been an absolute star. I mean, one thing I said about like if the Kickstarter like overfunded really, really well, which may or may not happen, just getting there at the moment, I'd be overjoyed about.
Yeah.
I said like I designed extra gods and goddesses, so we could even bring in some more gods and goddesses, which then I'd be working with her again on. At the moment, I think our goal is to fund. To fund would just be utterly wonderful.
For sure. That is a noble goal. Hopefully we can help you get to that point. Not that we have a massive audience to cater to, but we'll see who this reaches. Some things you were saying earlier actually leads me into, we're going to ask about your game design process. You mentioned your ugly pencil sketches, perhaps for mock-ups. What I guess what's that looks like? What do you start with?
You either start with a theme or you start with a mechanic. Because I love stories, I nearly always start with a theme. So for Skal, I had this kind of, I tend to collect notebooks, as I think many people do. And basically, when I had a good idea, I thought I'm going to choose just the right notebook to start with. And then I get that out. Like, and you put all your ideas down first. Like I wanted it to be this kind of game about this kind of game. These could be the ideas. It could have like these kind of cards or this kind of mechanics. And then you kind of almost have this initial, like 2 or 3 days of just creative outburst where you get as many ideas as possible. Then you need to kind of like sit down and look, okay, what of these could work? What is kind of similar to other games out there? Because obviously you can be inspired by other games, but you don't want to copy them. Exactly. You want to kind of like, I love the way that this game handles resource management, or I love the way that game did card design. So you sort of you do a bit of research then, and you think like, what works well in other games like this? What do I want my game to have something a bit unique about? Like for me, I mean, there are other games that do stacking of things, but not many. So I thought like the whole idea of the Viking and the cups and like the shot glass and so on, that would make it a bit unique and that kind of thing. Sure. So after that, you then sort of work on how could this get a prototype put together, which I'm always very guilty of because I try and make my prototype look as lovely as possible.
Sure.
And when I was basically like playtesting with my friends, they're like, you could have just drawn this with pencil and paper and we'd have been fine with it. And I'm like, no, it must be laser printed in color and everything. So yeah. And then there's a period of like, right, what works, what doesn't work. And then the problem is you don't want to throw away any of your initial ideas, especially if you really, really love them, but you've kind of got to be a little bit thick-skinned where you can kind of go, right, I can see this bit isn't adding very much, or that bit's a bit complicated. I could rewrite that, or I could even cut that out to make it simpler. Once you've kind of got a decent core of ideas, Then you play test it some more and see if it works.
Okay.
Then you start speaking to manufacturers, because you learn things like obviously, like when you're printing things, it's like how many tokens fit onto a board or how many cards fit onto a sheet.
Mm-hmm.
Usually about 55 cards fit onto a sheet. So if you had 66 cards in your game, you might need to lose 11 of them, and then it's kind of like, right, back to the design process.
Yeah.
So when I first made Top Hats and Directory, I designed 300 cards. This got narrowed down to 108.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
that's quite the reduction. Wow,
that was wild. But then I released a load of them as like print and play digital versions anyway, just for fun later on. So a lot of it is kind of finding the stage that works. And then if you think I actually want to do something professionally with this, you've got to look at what other games are out there. You've got to start thinking about like social media presence, which I've always found really, really hard. Because if you're going out to conventions all the time, you can speak to people, chat to people, get email addresses down. That's lovely. But obviously being a teacher is a really like time-consuming job. So I haven't got a huge amount of time to go out and go to events. So you kind of have this slow trickle of people who slowly kind of like get on board and get a few email addresses here and there. And it's a slow build-up of a contact list, which is, I think, my biggest area of weakness is I wish I had like a social media presence 10 times what I do, but unfortunately I don't. Because the thing about Kickstarter, which I've learned, is if you've got thousands and thousands of people behind you, you can more or less fund on day one. But if you've only got like hundreds of people behind you, it becomes much more of a slog, shall we say.
Sure.
And you're trying to like reach out in different social media avenues without sort of annoying too many people. Like you've got Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, but rather than like a guaranteed success, it becomes of a just maybe I might succeed, just maybe. And that's the hard part.
Yeah. Well, again, I've looked through the Kickstarter page, and I got to say, compared to some other ones I've seen for starting out board games, it looks very professional. I mean, you've got some 3D representations of the player mats and the dice coming down, and very detailed description. So was that just you that put all the work into designing that out?
Yeah, I mean, I worked with Ferdinand from America, who's from the Cardboard Stacker. He did the actual animation for me, which I'm hugely grateful for. But I kind of built the rest myself, basically. And I looked at the other games that were out there, and I looked at some good campaign pages, and I thought, right, that's kind of how I need to build it. So I then did like an initial version. But unfortunately, and this is the really silly thing, unfortunately, I built it on my laptop. And when I looked at the laptop, everything was fine until I looked at the preview campaign on my mobile, and everything had kind of like shrunk down horizontally.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, oh, right, the aspect ratio needs to change. So I then had to go back and alter all of my graphics again.
Man, that must have taken so much time.
Oh, it did. And it was really frustrating because it's like the kind of thing that you don't realize until you've done it and then you need to fix it.
Sure.
But I'm really happy the way it looks, the way it looks now. It's just trying to get as many people on board as possible.
Yeah. Well, earlier you mentioned working with different manufacturers. What's that even look like? Like, how do you reach out to find these people?
Well, the good thing is that, I mean, if as soon as you basically get anything on Kickstarter or an advertising thing, manufacturers will contact you all the time. Like, hi, I'm so-and-so from a production faction in China. We'd like to work with us. There are a few well-known people out there, like, for example, Wax Games, Panda Games, Longpack, all sorts of people there. I mean, I worked with Longpack and they're fantastic. A big consideration is the minimum order quantity, the MOQ. So previously, for a lot of companies, that used to be 1,000.
Okay.
Recently, in terms of post-COVID, a few of them have basically put up to 1,500.
Really?
And there's a very, very small amount of companies that are offering 500. So obviously, if you know your game is going to be a massive success, that doesn't matter. You know you're going to fund, you know you're going to make thousands of copies, all well and good.
Sure.
But for a first-time publisher, especially a small company publisher, having to raise 500 copies worth of money or 1,500 copies worth of money is a colossal difference. So that's why with Skal, what I've pitched everything as making 500 copies. So if I fund, that's how many I'll have. Obviously, if it had overfunded brilliantly, and if we'd gone shootingly far ahead, I'd have been up talking like 1,000, 1,500, 2,000. That would have been wonderful. But where I am now is like, can I get 500 copies made? So what you do is you send your design. Well, first you get in contact with somebody. You can more or less email them, get a contact from them, and say, look, this is what I want to do. They'll say, right, okay, can you put together a spec of all the components you need? So Often if it's like cards, it's like how many cards, what size, what thickness, what finish do you want? If you're using punch boards or cardstock, like what are the sizes? Can you basically send us some images? What's the box size like? What components do you need? Then they'll go away and think about that and research it back, and they'll give you a quote. And as again, I can really recommend Longpack on this. Longpack have been brilliant about that. They'll give you a quote, and you can kind of go, right, that's good. So what if we change that, or what if we change that? Usually the quote they'll give you will only be good for a certain amount of time, like 30 days or something. Then, to be fair, they'd need to calculate it again in case prices change.
Sure.
From there, you need to work out all your additional shipping costs. And as you know, at the moment, shipping is ridiculous across the world.
Yes, it's garbage.
That's been like the biggest thing. And this is the weird thing, obviously, because I'm in the UK, I've supported lots of Kickstarters, but since most of the Kickstarters are from the US, you kind of think for, let's say, if I'm looking for a really good fun card game, it could cost me $20, let's say, or $25. Mm-hmm. When I then look at shipping to the UK, it's then, and another $20.
Oh, wow.
So then you're thinking, okay, I was really happy that this was a brilliant $25 game. Is this a brilliant $45 game? The kind of decision that you've got to make. So with Skal, what I've tried to do is I've put the values in as they are, but then I've subsidized them out of my own money. So basically, it will cost me $15 to send a game to America, but I've put it on as something like $11. So I will pay the first $4 out of my own money, so you can get it for $11.
Hey,
it's things like that. So
sure.
Yeah, you've got to make it work. And then obviously once you've got your manufacturing costs done, once you've got your shipping costs done, you work out any taxes, you add those on. So you end up with something that's basically cost what's called a landed cost, which means to get all the costs done. When you've paid for everything, you end up with a certain amount. Then what you need to do is you need to work out let's say that will make you 1,000 copies. You don't want to basically put onto Kickstarter a project that's going to cost you 1,000 copies. You need 1,000 backers to work or not. So what you normally do is you times that number by 3 or 4 or whatever. So you end up with a kind of a recommended retail price for the game. That's what you would sell it in at the shops. Of course, on Kickstarter, especially if you're backing it early, people want a good deal. So you might need to knock, let's say, $5 off the price to make it more attractive to people at Kickstarter, so that later on you can sell it for the full retail price at retail. If everything funds and it goes really, really well, if you overfund by quite a lot, what you might be contacted by a distributor. Now, a distributor is kind of the people who have like huge warehouses of games who sell to game shops. So they'll have a great big catalog, maybe let's say 150 different games. And game shops, the friendly local game shops, will contact these mega companies and kind of go, right, what's new this season? Can you send me like 30 different games? And they'll send like 10 or 12 copies, 30 different games. So what they will do is they'll look for Kickstarters that have done well, and they'll contact you and say, right, we would like to buy 100 copies of your game, and we would like to pay half price.
Okay.
So as a publisher, you're kind of going, right, so on one hand, that does sound good that I'm selling 100 copies of game. Yeah. On the other hand, I'm not going to get much money from it at all, but it'll get my game out there.
Exactly.
So that's
that publicity.
That's the decision you've got to kind of weigh off. So if you're at that position, it's really exciting for you. You've done really, really well.
Yeah.
But as you can imagine, there is only a teeny tiny handful of people out there who make enough money from games that can be their full-time job. Most of us, it's kind of like, I've got my job and then the games are a hobby and I'm doing the best I can. So yeah, that's the journey.
Right. Okay. Well, here's the follow-up question then. What's it like working, finding and working with a publisher as your follow-up step?
Publishers, generally the ones out there that you've worked with are very, very supportive. Obviously, they want you to succeed. You want you to succeed. Often because they're in different time zones, it's a matter of like, I'm going to send an email out and I might get a response sometime this week. And obviously then the like terms, the payment terms, all the rest of it, that depends on how good a relationship you've got with your person. So far, I've been pretty happy with the people I've worked with. There was one minor cock up about Top Hats, because basically we funded just a little bit more. So basically we could afford to produce an expansion pack.
Okay.
So basically this is like a little mini pack of about 12 cards that I did on, which is just good fun. So the idea was that should have been included with the base game. Unfortunately, the manufacturer forgot to put it in the base game. So the game got made The game got shipped. It cost me about $2,000 to ship the game around the world. I paid that. Then they were like, we need to send this little pack of 12 cards out. We're going to do that now, and we're going to send you the bill. The pack, so the cost to send out the whole game worldwide was about $2,000.
Uh-huh.
The cost to send out these packs of 12 cards was $1,200.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And it took 4 months to claim the money back from them.
Man.
But there you go. You have hiccups. In terms of Long Pack have been brilliant. I'm working with Gameland at the moment. They've been really good so far. So we'll see how things go with them. But if you get a good company to work with, it can be a really rewarding experience.
Sure. It's sounding to me like the job of a game designer is being a professional problem solver. Is that pretty accurate?
Definitely.
All right. Huh. Okay, well, let's close this off with, do you have any future projects that you have in mind that we might expect to see soon?
Well,
Ooh.
In the last week, I have started working on my next game. An idea has just come to me, and it's going to basically be a worker placement, resource management game. It's probably going to take me about a year to work on. I'm going to look back over all my other games I've worked on. So it's very, very early days yet, but I'm thinking, like, how could I make this work? And also the big question now is, since working as a Kickstarter project by myself is a fairly full time, do I want to try and publish this next game myself? Or do I want to try and propose it to an existing games company out there and saying, like, I've got the idea for a game. Would you be interested in publishing it? Because that's kind of like the next step of, like, rather than going solo Kickstarter mode, you could basically try and put your idea to another company and say, look, I've got an idea for a game. Are you interested? Because they're the bigger companies have got, like, the thousands of people, the development teams.
Sure.
That's kind of an avenue that so far I haven't gone down yet. Because previously I was always worried that, let's say you come with them with a great idea and they'll go, yeah, we'll take that idea. We'll buy it off you. We'll change 90% of it.
Oh, no.
And send it out. And I'd be like, no, please, no.
Yeah, it's my baby.
But, exactly. So, but recently I've been speaking to a couple of people, good friends of mine, from the hairy game lords. Who want to have a fudge making business, and they're like, well, there's these couple of companies that we really recommend that you should speak to, because we've nudged people their way and they've produced the games as is, and the people have been really happy with them. So that may be over the next year something that I look into as well, rather than just seeing Kickstarter as the only route. So yeah, a year of discovery and exploration, really. It's going to be exciting.
Well, I'm excited to see where that happens. I'm assuming on your social media and Instagram we can see those updates as they arrive.
Definitely.
Awesome. Fantastic. And finally, for Skal, where can people go to support that and get on board?
Right. Well, the main webpage is just skalgame.com. So SKALGAME.com. You can find it on Kickstarter at Skal, the Rune Dice Game, because all the dice are going to be special rune dice. You can find me on Facebook at Andrew Prowse or Rogue Artist Creations. And we just love to see you. Oh, on Twitter, I'm at Rogue A Creations, and Instagram, I'm Rogue Artist Creations. So yeah.
All right. Well, Andrew, it has been a genuine pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing us your board game wisdom.
Thank you very much, Cody. It's been great speaking to you.
Thanks for tuning in, folks. This has been the Tabletop Shop podcast featuring our special guest, Andrew Prowse. His Kickstarter, Skal, is live until November 24th. Links are in the description, so definitely go check it out and show some support. Thank you guys, and keep on playing games.